House will please come to order. Majority Floor Leader Sommers.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
All those in favor of Majority Floor Leader's motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes.
You got your report?
Mm-hmm.
Reading clerk.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 26, do pass. Senate File 38, do pass amended. Representative Provenza, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the Committee of the Whole report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Congratulations, Representative Provenza. I probably should have actually let her make the motion too, but we'll get it on the next round. Representative Gray, you have a privilege. Please proceed.
Privilege of the floor. We have a fellow radio broadcaster in the chamber from Douglas, Dennis Switzer. From Douglas, please welcome him to the chamber. Thank you.
Dennis Switzer, KOLL, Gillette, Wyoming, 1983. Those were the days, ladies and gentlemen. Those were the days. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I misspoke on the bills that I announced for Monday. So at noon recess in room 301, we'll hear Senate File 97, 82, and 56.
Thank you. So members, we seem to be missing a committee. Almost back. So we have several things. We're going to do some business first. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, today we have the privilege of welcoming Wyoming's 2022 Teacher of the Year, Brittany Morgan. Come on out, Miss Morgan. All right. Hold on a second. All right. So welcome, Brittany. I'll just give you a little background, then she's going to offer some words. Brittany is a first grade teacher at Harrison Elementary in Green River. Loves teaching, has had a love for teaching since a young age, has become the fourth generation of educators in her family. Every student Miss Montgomery encounters is treated as they were her own child. When school shuts down, Miss Montgomery began reading stories online to help children keep a sense of normalcy. This quickly picked up by a local news source, and story time with Mrs. Montgomery was shared with thousands of children across the country. Very cool. Very cool.
Really,
so anyway, so welcome, Miss Montgomery, and please address the Wyoming House of Representatives.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and representatives, for the privilege of the floor. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here speaking in front of you today. I am honored to be representing the great state of Wyoming. I'm also very humbled to represent our Wyoming educators. As I stand here today, it's grounding to think of the numerous influential people, including yourselves, that have stood here before and fought to ensure that a great future is here for our state. The decisions made these next few weeks are critical to ensure the future of our state for decades to come. The last few years have been trying for our country, for our society. Significant change has come from the challenges that we have faced. The world we live in today is almost unrecognizable from just a few years ago. It is time to reevaluate how we see education and how we treat our educators. Wyoming students are the most important asset that we have in this state, arguably in the country. I'm a little biased, obviously, but hopefully you all have that same opinion. Our children are navigating how to live in a digitally driven, continuously connected world. They have unlimited access to information at all times. And this access to all this information is more than they've ever had in our history. Just ask any 3-year-old. They can show you how to use your phone, how to send things, all the things. They know how to do that. Students are being asked to do more and at earlier and earlier ages every single year. In kindergarten classrooms today, students are reading fluently, accurately, and comprehending. Just a few years ago, not so long ago, our kindergartners had a half day and they napped during that time. So it is a very different world that we are living in. Our Wyoming students are being held to standards that many of them need more time and more support to meet. We are seeing an increased need for social and emotional learning to support and address the challenges our students are faced with. Even still, our Wyoming students continue to persevere and prove how resilient they can be. Wyoming educators are also proving how resilient they are. Teachers are being tasked with more than ever before, but given the same amount of time to accomplish these things. It's almost impossible to put a single definition on an educator these days. We teach, obviously, but we're also counselors, cheerleaders, caregivers, creators, interventionists, specialists, sometimes mom, sometimes dad. Once I was called grandpa. The child was very, very quiet, or very tired, sorry. But yeah, these are just a few things we do. There's so much more that encompasses an educator. We continuously evolve because that is what teachers do. They evolve, they adapt, they shift. Anything and everything that needs to be done is done. We show up because we believe in what we do, and we believe our students deserve the very best. I invite all of you to come spend a day in my classroom. The only way to truly understand what it's like to be an educator is to experience it. I promise, I guarantee and promise that day will be full of excitement and eye-opening experiences and also exhaustion. We're seeing the effects of the added responsibilities and pressure of our educators. Nationwide, a staggering high rate of educators are leaving the profession. When they leave, they take their experience, their passion, and the love of learning with them, which is essential for today's students. As well, the number of college students entering the profession of education is dwindling. Education is not the #1 career path for today. Wyoming students deserve to have quality educators, and Wyoming educators deserve to be valued. It is essential that we find a way to combat the high rate of burnout and to address the difficulty in new teacher recruitment. I recognize the work you have done in this session, a very trying session at that. And I also realize there's much more ahead of you. I thank you for your dedication to our state. I thank you for your time, for your thought, for the passion that you put into making sure that our future as a state is a bright one. I leave you with this thought. If Wyoming educators continue to leave and new teacher numbers continue to dwindle, where will the next generation of Wyoming leaders come from? Thank you.
Don't run off. Don't run off. Don't run off. So first graders. Yes. First graders. Well, you would have, if we showed up at your class, I'd fit right in. So that would
Absolutely.
be good.
I mean,
We appreciate you.
it's a very good time. Yes.
Well, we thank you for your comments, and we have this little tradition. We like to send our special guests down one of the
Oh.
hallways. So,
Oh.
ladies and gentlemen, you would give our Teacher of
Thank
the
you
Year
guys so
a
much.
warm
Thank you.
send-off. Thank you very much, and I'd just like to recognize Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Schrader's over here. Thank you for bringing here. Thank you for doing your work. his staff. And then Representative Brown, you wanted a privilege of the floor? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have some outstanding educators here with us today from the Wyoming Department of Education's Level Up program. Hopefully you were able to walk downstairs and grab some food and meet them and talk over what education looks like with them a little bit over the lunch hour. A little bit more about the program. The Level Up Leadership Program seeks to elevate Wyoming's educational professionals by providing leadership development to an annual cohort of Wyoming's leading educators. This program will help education leaders build relationships that cross district lines, increase the knowledge of what's going on in other parts of the state, and help these leaders develop strategies to continue to engage with their community. This year's Level Up Leadership cohort is made up of the 2022 District Teachers of the Year, Principals, and Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching finalists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome these outstanding educators to the House of Representatives.
Well, welcome. We're so glad you're here joining us. Thank you for all the work you do. I counted about 24, so about half of our school districts might be represented here, and maybe I couldn't count fast enough, but wonderful. We thank you for your work, and congratulations. All right, any other privileges of the floor? Privileges. So members, at the end of each week, when we've had a student page for the week, we give them an opportunity to tell us what or if they learned anything in their time with the Wyoming representatives. So today, we've been pleased to have Ms. Gomelski from Laramie here. So Ms. Gomelski, if you'd like to say a few words to the House, please. Yep, their microphone is on. You have a privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for this opportunity to be here this week. It's been really educational watching the legislative process in real time and being able to watch all of you put in so much passion and dedication in what you do. I apologize to all of you that I awkwardly bumped into or gave the wrong note to. I really appreciate all the wise words that many of you shared with me and the long hours you all put in to be here every day and how much you care about representing Wyoming citizens. The PAGE program is also a paid position, and so I have the legislature to thank for that as well. And I'm hoping to make something meaningful of that. And so, as a lot of you know, there's a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine right now, and Ukraine is being invaded again, like it was just less than a century ago. And just like my great-grandparents in the 1940s, people are escaping the country out of necessity with very little with them. So I'm going to donate everything that I made from this position this week to the refugees in Ukraine. And I very, very humbly urge you all to join me in standing with solidarity with the Ukrainian people and the refugees there. So I very humbly ask that you all consider donating just one day's worth of your salary, whatever that may be, to the refugees in desperate need of help in Ukraine right now. And I think it would mean a lot if the Wyoming House of Representatives would represent Wyoming values in standing against injustice and making a stand and lending out a helping hand. Thank you all for your time and your consideration.
Wow, Sophia, you kind of capped off a week with a lot of emotion, that we've had some different things, and you brought it to us too. So thank you very much. Thank you for that passion and that just caring. Thank you very much. All right, members, we're going to do some business and we'll go back into committee of the whole. Chairman Nicholas, would you come to the dais, please? And Vice Chair Larson? And okay, let's do so we have some standing committee reports.
Senate File 3, sponsored by Transportation. Radioactive Materials Transport Fee, an act relating to commercial vehicle fees. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 3, Radioactive Materials Transport Fee, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 73, sponsored by Management Audit, codifying the Institutional Land Fund, an act relating to public funds. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 73 engrossed, codifying the Institutional Land Fund, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Larson, Vice Chairman. Senate File 80, sponsored by Water. Omnibus Water Bill Construction, an act relating to water development projects. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 80 engrossed, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 90, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Capital Financing Select Committee membership, an act relating to the legislature. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 90 engrossed, Capital Financing Select Committee membership, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Larson, Vice Chairman.
Messages from the Senate.
Message 205. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 66, American Rescue Plan Act Recovery Funds Appropriations. The Senate failed to concur on House amendments to the bills listed above by the vote indicated. Noes 28, excused 1, conflict 1. Message 206. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with a like Committee Number 1 from the House on amendments to Senate File 66. The Senate conferees are Senator Kinski, Chairman, Senator Guru, Senator Hicks. Message 207. Mr. Speaker, Senate File 67, State-Funded Capital Construction. The Senate failed to concur on House amendments to the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 2, noes 27, excused 1. Message 208. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with a like Committee Number 1 from the House on amendments to Senate File 67. The Senate conferees are Senator Hicks, Chairman, Senator Guru, Senator Steinmetz. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Members, in response to message 208, Conference Committee request on Senate File, actually, I'm going to do 206. 206, Joint Conference Committee Number 1 on Senate File 66. Walters, Chairman, Kinner, Nicholas. Walters, Kinner, Nicholas. 66. 67, my apologies. 67, Chairman Walters, Kinner, Nicholas. On 66, Larson, Lloyd, Chairman, Newsom, Simpson. Larson, Newsom, Simpson. Members, as you recall, we have a limited amount of time to preserve all the rights that we want as a legislature in these budget-type bills. So that's why we're asking conference committees to move forth as expeditiously as possible. Is that it? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Representative Provenza.
Will the committee of the whole, committee of the whole, please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 32. Will the reading clerk please read the bill?
Senate File 32, sponsored by Education. K-3 Reading Assessment and Intervention Program, an act relating to reading assessment and intervention. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4 Education, to whom is referred Senate File 32 engrossed, K-3 Reading Assessment and Intervention Program, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Brown, Harshman, Nyman, Newsom, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Excused, Representative Connolly. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Brown?
Ooh,
Co-Chairman Brown.
Vice. But Chairman will work. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 32 do pass. I would also further move the Standing Committee amendment at this time, and I will work that in as we go through the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an interim, this was our #1 interim topic for the Education Committee, and justifiably, it was probably one of the most critical pieces of legislation that came out of this committee. And so what I want to do is I don't want to take a ton of time because we've still got plenty of other files to go through, but I want to make sure we all understand what this bill is planning on doing. Give you a little bit of background. About 3 years ago, this body worked on a K-3 reading education piece. And what we said in that piece of legislation was that every single school district needs to be screening their students for dyslexia and other reading issues. So there was some issues surrounding that piece of legislation. Not all districts were doing it the same. There was some doing it, some not. And so we worked at the time with the good current now chairman of revenue to pass that piece of legislation. And this is following up on that piece of legislation, and we're actually really trying to strengthen what we're doing here. And what we have found through this process, ladies and gentlemen, is that we've got 48 school districts throughout the state of Wyoming. And what we've got is about 70, 75-ish different screening tools that are being used across the state. And when we were going through this, we said, well, how are you able to compare what's going on in one school district with another if we've got 75 different screening tools being used across the state to screen for dyslexia? So this bill is trying to attempt to fix that. And what we're trying to do is narrow that scope just a little bit. And what started out as a longer discussion and a more narrowly focused discussion to try to pivot into what it exactly we want to do, which is actually find 3 to 5 screening assessment tools that actually tell us whether a child is experiencing dyslexia or any other learning disability for reading. And what we've done is we've turned it into a little bit more of a study bill. And the reason we've turned it into a study bill is we've learned that there are some school districts that are really doing a fantastic job at what they're supposed to be doing, and we have some school districts that just clearly are not doing it at all. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and walk you through the bill, and then we'll go ahead and move into the amendment as well. And so if we turn over to page 2, this starts the process. Page 2, and as you notice, we've got a lot of current language in statute here, and this language is just being amended. And what you have here is on line 3 and 4, we say that we're going to have an intervention program that is identified by the state superintendent under subsection D of this section. And so if you go to subsection D, it's a little easier to understand what we're talking about. Subsection D starts over on page 3, and we say that the superintendent, within consultation of Wyoming school districts, professionals in the area of dyslexia and other reading difficulties, flipping over onto page 4, and appropriate stakeholders shall promulgate rules as necessary to assist each school district to administer its reading assessment and intervention program. Then we have a lot of new language here between line 6 and line 15. And what we're looking for here is what I had mentioned earlier. We're looking at the meat of the bill here, which is to have this cohort of people narrowly focus in and find out what it is that we actually need to screen for dyslexia and other reading disabilities. And so that's what we're looking for with that particular section. Moving over to page 5, we have the area that you may have heard from your school districts, that starting in year 22-23, the school district is going to be required to continue to provide these types of evidence-based literacy instruction and professional development. So what we have done here, and this is where the first portion of or the biggest portion of the amendment is coming in, is we talk about making sure that if you are going to be teaching kids in any way, shape, or form about reading, whether you're a teacher or whether you're a reading interventionist or whether you're a special ed paraprofessional, whatever that case may be, you need to have this professional development as well. And so what we've done, if you take over and you look at the second page of the amendment, on page 5 and page 6, we strike out the word teacher and we write district employee. This is the largest change that we did to this bill as it came out of the other end of the hall down to us. And this was really felt by the committee to be a strong impact statement to say that if you're going to be working with our students, we need to make sure that you're trained as well. I'm going to work backwards here and go back over to the other portion of the amendment here, which is back on page 3. And the reason I'm coming back to that this way is once we've screened this student, and if this student is found to have dyslexia, right now there's nothing in current statute that says that a parent needs to be notified. So we have now officially said you must notify this parent of any student that they have that has been identified as having dyslexia or other reading issue, and you also must notify them with an explanation of the screening results. Right now, you can say, hey, look, the kid's been identified, but they don't understand why. They don't know what's going on. And so this really brings the parent back into the conversation and really provides a little bit more structure to this entire program. And then moving on to page 3, and this looks like a very, very large amendment, but really, ladies and gentlemen, it's not. This was brought to us by the good chairman of revenue, and this is really a good another piece of the meat of the amendment here is what we're talking about is if we have kids that are identified in kindergarten and we're watching them and we notice that there's 10 kids in this class that have reading issues, and we want to follow that cohort from kindergarten all the way through the 3rd grade. So we want to know what that progress looks like. And that's exactly what this portion of the amendment says is we're going to look at a cohort based by grade to ensure that each one of these cohorts is getting better with time. And so that's what the amendment does, Madam Chairman. So at this time, if there's any questions on the amendment, I'll stand for those.
Are there any questions on the standing committee amendment? Question being called. You have heard the motion for the question having been called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? That amendment does pass. Back on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, with the remainder of what we've got here, I pretty much have explained it to you. You may have heard some concerns addressed from your school district, and this would honestly be the time that I'd really like to hear, number one, some of those concerns, but number two, any questions that you have on this bill. Again, this was worked very heavily. What was expected to take 1 to 2 meetings ended up turning into 4, and the committee really worked this bill, and I think we've got a very good, solid piece of legislation here to work forward with.
Are there, oh, Representative Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I heard right, as it was indicated in the presentation, that we can identify many of our school districts that are doing an outstanding job in this area. And we can identify school districts that are not doing an outstanding job in this area. And if that's the case, that we're able to discern which are excellent and which are not, why another study bill?
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a question to that. With the, first off, I think it's a wonderful idea. I worked in the school district for 15 years, and it was very difficult after we did testing of children through DIBELS and different things to say, this child cannot read, but we didn't know why. And so we said, could they be dyslexic? Well, maybe, but we don't have that testing till they're in the 4th or 5th grade. Well, by then, that's a little late. So I am pleased as punch about this bill. My question is why or how, since you're going to put in professional development, which is a wonderful idea across the population of educators, that's really good. But will there be like a follow-up, or maybe this is up to the superintendent or the individual districts, how they're going to continue that, whether it be through webinar, whether it be through a reading teacher, or whatever. So anyway, thank you.
Majority Floor Leader Sommers.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So to answer the good gentleman from the center of the state's question, yeah, you can tell at 3rd grade where districts lie. That doesn't mean you know where individual students lie. And the greater question is, with these assessments and screeners, are we identifying the same child in each district, right? Do we kind of understand that the child identified in District A is the same child as at District C or B or D? And the reason that's important is if we were to decide to put more resources or something towards those children, you have to realize, you have to know whether you're identifying the same child. And then also to understand are the grand scheme of screeners, right? There's a lot of screeners out there. I forget how many. I think the vice chair has it. It was 50 or something. I can't remember now. It was a large number. It was really to identify, are all of these appropriate? Are they not appropriate? And what children do they look at? And then obviously the other part of the study was to look at professional development. And with the idea on what is the minimum, right? We have in a bill a number, I think it's once every 3 years you have to do professional development. But really we want professionals to take a look at that and say, maybe it's one every 5 years, maybe whatever. But we want to understand how much professional development is needed for those, not just teachers, but district employees that are providing services to those reading students.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just a couple questions. One, how will this affect those districts that already have a program similar to this in place? Will they be required to change their intervention program if they already have one? And then two, what will the cost be to our local school districts? I assume there's going to be some sort of cost attached to this.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I want to circle back and I want to touch base on a couple of good things that the majority floor leader did discuss as well, but want to make sure that we answer them 100%. One of the things that we talk about when we're talking about a study bill here is the big portion of this comes with identifying the school districts, but what we don't have is the ability to compare apples and apples. We've got 70 different tools being used to identify these reading issues, these reading disabilities. And unfortunately, we can't tell how those are being used with one another. They're not, as I just discussed in announcing the Leap into Leadership, or I'm sorry, wasn't Leap into Leadership, but our Level Up people, we need to be able to see what's happening across district lines. So that's a big portion of why we're studying this as well. But the other portion of this is when we look at the assessment piece on whether or not a student is being identified for dyslexia does not determine whether or not the student can read at grade level. That's what we do with YTOP. And we determine whether or not that student has the ability to read and comprehend what's going on in the classroom. But they may be able to see those words, they may be able to understand them, but they may be dyslexic, and they may be struggling doing that. So this is working to make sure that if they are dyslexic, we're catching that just as early, and so we don't have to worry about special education costs down the road. Doing this in the future and trying to get on top of this now is where we really need to be at. If you're not able to read by 3rd grade, you're going to be struggling as you're moving down the road as well. So that's why we really want to make sure we get this early and we don't have to worry about the remediation process in the future. The next question that I had here was worried about professional development and whether that's going to be a follow-up or whether we have a continuation on this. And that truly is the meat of this bill, is why we decided to do a study on this, is we'd like the interested parties to be involved in that process. We don't think that it's the committee did not feel it was in the right stance for the legislature to say, you will do this. We want to make sure that this is evidence-based, and we want to make sure that the people that are involved in this on a day-to-day basis have their input, and they are going to develop what needs to be done, submit that to the superintendent, and then we will make that call as a legislative body when we come back next year. And then the next one that I had here was from the good country lawyer in the north here that, will a school district have to change what they do? There's a potential, and there is a slight potential of that. However, chances are that the majority of the school districts that are doing well with this are utilizing a good program, and that's probably going to be one of the programs that's found through this process. One of the things that has been discussed, and again, why we went with a study as opposed to imposing and saying that you will do one of these 3 processes, is because we do recognize there's more than 3 programs out there that work well. There is certainly, in my opinion, and a few others, there's 3 that work very, very well. But we also want to make sure that the people that are using a program that may not fit the superintendent's recommendation still have the opportunity to use that in the future. So that's the answer to that. And then the last one is what is the cost? Again, why we're doing a study on this. We want to make sure that what we had been paying for in the past, again, we had this discussion briefly in committee that we used to fund for assessments in the model. And 2 years ago, we cut all of that funding out. We used to do about $33 per student in the model. Then it was cut down to $25, and then we've completely removed that. So that was a cost-cutting measure in 2018. And since we don't fund that any longer, there will be a cost that will be associated with this in the future to fund these assessments, but they're negligible compared to what you'd be talking about. Some of the interested parties were telling me you're looking at anywhere between $3 and $12 per student. So depending upon what assessment is chosen also depends upon the costs on those. So with that, Madam Chairman, I also see the good chairman of Travel and Rec has some questions.
Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just would like to ask the Vice Chair, we talk about disabilities, but yet you keep highlighting one type of disability, particularly dyslexia. So I'm curious about that. And also, what is the cost of an assessment program that like a district might be using, say, for instance, in Sheridan County right now, where we know they've had success? And I'm wondering what the cost might be to another district who has to buy into that type of assessment program.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So good questions, and I do appreciate the former member of education bringing these forward. So dyslexia is the most prominent, and dyslexia happens to be probably the most diagnosable or the most diagnosed reading difficulty out there. I'm sure there are others. What we have in current statute is looking at dyslexia and other reading disabilities. So that's why we talk about dyslexia. There's other reading disabilities out there. However, the screeners will identify those as well. And then to the question regarding cost and whether or not this is going to be an additional cost too, I want to remind this body in particular, the school district should be doing this already. This is currently in statute. And so there shouldn't need to be any addition to them right now, because we're starting to find out what we're going to talk about in this body next year, and that is which project or which programs are we going to use, what does the Department of Education feel that they would recommend as a group of programs to look for these issues. So there's no cost at this point. And to kind of give you a rough estimate, they can range anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 for a school district to implement them. But then it also comes with a slight cost on actually training the teachers through professional development. And that can range anywhere from training an individual teacher at, $50 to $60 an hour, to also having them be able to train the trainers, which costs thousands of dollars if they decide to do that inside their own school district. Those are things that we'll talk about later once we have a little bit more information on what the Department of Education has recommended to us.
Representative Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two points. One is, we just heard the Teacher of the Year tell us that educators are being asked to do more and more within a finite amount of time. So if we're going to ask them now to do more professional development in this area, what's the trade-off? What won't they be learning about in their professional development? What won't they be doing? What won't they be focused on in order to shift gears and focus on this? Don't get me wrong, I am a huge proponent of teaching kids how to read early in life. There. I do find it troubling that in 2022, we don't know how to teach kids how to read effectively. I think that's what I'm hearing, is that we need to study and research, how kids learn to read. And I'm shocked that we don't already know how to do that.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just to follow up, the conversation is wonderful because you get to hear about all other districts and experiences and things that people need, things that people have, things that people can share. But from one district, I know that cross-training to have people, teachers are allotted 8 or 9 days a year for professional development. That's already in their year. And so they develop what things they need to learn or what things they want to cover when they do that. As far as dyslexia, I worked with interventions for reading and math. The children that have those problems, at first, let me say, working in a small group of children, you get to see them one-on-one a lot more than a teacher trying to manage a classroom. And working with those children to see the frustration and to see the anger and to see the movement and the distractions and all the things that they'll do when they should be reading at a second grade level and they're not. We heard from the Teacher of the Year earlier that children right now in kindergarten are learning things that used to be taught in second grade. I know when I worked with kindergartners, they were writing paragraphs. They were writing stories. They were doing all those things. Can you imagine a child that is dyslexic that can't do that? The thing I'd want to push, and I'm not one to push for a lot more money for education, but the thing I would like to encourage you to think about is that in some districts, they are not thought to be identifiable until 5th grade. That's too late. That's way too late. So what I hope by this bill and what I heard, and I'll listen to the rest of the testimony, is that we will have people from the teachers down through the various employees that are trained to identify and get together and collaborate with one another, something this child might need, to send them over there, get them tested, see if that's something they need. And you can add that. I'm not trying to simplify it, but you can add that to some of the things that's being done and take it from there. So I would just encourage you to think about getting things done early on rather than having to deal with issues later. Thank you.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, just kind of back up on this. I think we're getting off into different areas. Really, what the bill is about is what we're already doing in this state. Every district, every child gets a screener that takes 3 minutes. Okay, it's not the YTOP test That'll take an hour or two. We got rid of that in the K through 2. It wasn't required by federal law. That's at the end of the year. It's cut scores. If you think that means something, I'd be glad to sit down and talk with you what it means, right? And if you want to talk about those kind of assessments where we can compare ourselves to other states, you have to use the NAEP test, which has been around now 30-some years. And if you look at it and take the last 3 or 4 NAEP tests and add all that together, Wyoming's the 3rd or 4th best education system in the United States, certainly the best in the West. So when all this conversation gets confused with the YTOP, which says 55% of our 3rd and 4th graders are at proficient or advanced. Well, what about the other 45%? It's all based on a cut score. And I invite you, I can send you the link to all go take the 4th grade YTOP reading test. I encourage you to take it so you can see what a 4th grader does on their iPad. That's not about this. This is about kids who come to school from all various backgrounds, identifying them early if they need a little extra help. That's really all it's about. And currently the law says districts can pick whatever screening tool they want to use. What this bill says is no, working in collaboration, districts, the department, school boards around the state, let's come up with a list of like 4 screeners that we can agree on, and then we kind of can all start looking at this through kind of the same lens instead of having 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different screeners around the state. You know, and then we just put in there that this has to be done a minimum 3 times a year. Teachers are already doing that. I was married to a 36-year veteran 1st grade teacher, and if a kid needs it, they'll screen them even more. It doesn't take very long. But I think the key is, and that's why we brought the bill a couple of years ago that you all supported, the governor signed into law, to really make sure dyslexia is a medical diagnosis, but we want to really screen that early and then get the information to parents and say, you know, junior's right on track or junior's a little behind, and this is what we're going to do. Now, somebody asks, what do you have to give up for that? Well, because these little guys, we've got standards in foreign language, we've got standards in physical education, fine arts, social studies, all of it. Well, something has to give a little bit if you're going to pull them out of their classroom to spend an extra hour a day to read. And I think that's that ongoing conversation, how we're going to work that out. So I think this bill is just another progression. The first K through 3 reading bills were brought before any of us were serving. It's right around the year 2000, right? And so this is a constant thing we'll continue to work on year after year after year. But man, our kids are doing great. You just listen to the 1st grade teacher of the year. Kids are doing really well. Our teachers are doing well. We just want to kind of bring a little bit more, you know, just a little bit more controls on what screeners being used so we can have these comparisons. And then in my district where we have about 1,000 per grade. So if we have 100 kindergartners show up in the September screener say, hey, they need a little help with reading. How do those 100 kids look in May? That screener can help us with that, right? How do they look in December? And then learning loss over the summer, is it the same guys in 1st grade? And all that, so we can start getting a little more information. But, so it's a good bill. I appreciate all the folks who've worked on it and encourage your aye vote. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Brown's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 32 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed. The Senate File 32 has passed committee of the whole. We're on to the next bill.
Madam Chair.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, Senate File 83, having been numbered, signed by the sponsor, and submitted to the chief clerk, but not having been taken from the desk and placed.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams. That motion is out of order. And I would ask for Majority Floor Leader Sommers.
So, Madam Chairman, we are in committee of the whole. You want me to do? Okay. So, Madam Chairman, I move that the House rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor of Majority Floor Leader Summers' motion, please say aye. All those opposed? No. That has passed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. No. All those opposed, please stand. Uh, 18 to 29, the motion has failed. We're staying in committee of the whole. Representative McGuire, do you want a privilege of the floor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Privilege of the floor.
Go ahead, Representative McGuire.
Thank you. So we've had some fun with the book, This Day in Wyoming History, and I just thought I'd point out that on this day in 1881, there was an explosion in Almy, Wyoming, which I've actually been to Almy, killed 31 miners. In 1884, this legislature passed a tax authorization for the purpose of constructing a university. In 1886, Governor Warren authorized the construction of a Capitol building as approved by the legislature. So this particular building, if you call that the birthday of this building, 136 years ago today, this building was authorized from the legislature and signed into law by the governor. So also, we have as a special guest, the son of the author of this book, Marcus Holscher, is with us today. Marcus has the distinction of while his dad was working 2 jobs and writing a book, he was playing baseball in Casper. So please stand up, Marcus, and let's welcome Marcus.
The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 10. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 10, sponsored by Agriculture, Predator Control, an act relating to agriculture. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 10, Predator Control, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson Dan, Western, Wharf, Winter. Excused, Representative Blackburn. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Eklund?
Madam Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 10 do pass, and I will explain the bill. Madam Chairman, this is a fairly simple cleanup. In fact, I thought they were already able to do it. It specifies that the Department of Ag can continue or shall coordinate efforts and may contract for predator control, allowing the Animal Damage Management Board to contract directly for predator services. There are a few changes within the statute. If there are any questions on them, I'd be happy to answer them, but this this kind of streamlines a procedure that they do already.
Are there any questions on the bill? Hearing the question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Eklund's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 10 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Senate File 10 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 48. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 48, sponsored by Natural Resource Finding. 2022 Large Project Funding, an act relating to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Funding Act. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 48, 2022 Large Project Funding, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson-Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stiff, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill Senate File 48 do pass, and I will attempt to explain the bill with a little help from my friends. This is a bill that we see every year. It's paid for, of course, by the Select Natural Resources Trust Fund, so it's not coming out of the general fund. This year we have 5 projects. I'll just go over them quickly, and if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them. The first project is Northeast Forest Health. The sponsor is the Crook County Conservation District. The purpose of the project is to remove encroaching conifers and other species from the forest understory and chemical and mechanical treatment of invasive species and annual grasses on a portion of approximately 350,000 acres. The total project cost is $1,308,800, and our portion of that is $400,000. And just to show you, give you an example of how these are leveraged. Every one of these projects are leveraged, and we do get some help from our friends. But just on this one particular, this first project, let me go through the list of the people that are actually involved in this. Crook County Natural Resources and the Weston County National Resource District, Wyoming Game and Fish, Wyoming State Forestry, Muley Fanatic Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, Nyman Timber, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, NRCS, and 80 private landowners.
Representative Paxton, just make sure we don't use proper names.
It's in the bill, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, please continue. Thank you.
Okay, the next project is the KC Buffalo Mule Deer Crossing. Those of you that joined us on our summer outing got to witness part of that. The project purpose fence to construct a roadway to replace an underpass construction on approximately 15 miles of Interstate 25 between the towns of Buffalo and KC in Johnson County in order to allow for the safe deer movement across the interstate highway. And the cost of the project, total cost of the project is $5,050,000, and our appropriation is $500,000. The next project is the Killdeer Wetlands project, sponsored by the Green River Greenbelt Task Force. The project purpose is the modification and retrofit of a stream channel and diversion structures on the Green River within the town of Green River in Sweetwater County in order to maintain fish passage and so on and so forth. The total cost of the project, $1,183,000, and our contribution to that would be $200,000. The South Pass Aspen Project 3, sponsored by the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. Project purpose, restoration of aspen woodlands through removal of encroaching conifers by chemical prescribed fire treatment on approximately 17,000 500 acres in Fremont County in order to maintain habitat and seasonal movement of mule deer, elk, antelope, and other species. The total cost of the project, $2,559,500, and our share of that would be $300,000. The final project, Henry's Fork Fish Passage, project sponsors Trout Unlimited. Project purpose is to modify and retrofit a stream channel and diversion structures on the Henry's Fork in southern Wyoming to maintain fish passage, reduce potential for catastrophic flooding, enhance the valves from natural wetlands, and improve irrigation and so forth. Total cost of the project, $752,215, and our share is $296,000. And with that, I think one of our other members has a contribution. Is that right? I guess he's not up there, so that concludes the, oh, it is over there. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My good fellow representative just stole the one I was going to talk about. It's 50 miles of the Henry Fork. It's fantastic. And he did mention that a lot of landowners chipped in on that. And as they went down this 50 miles, besides doing fish habitat, they actually enhanced these irrigation outlets. So it really helped the landowners quite a bit. They were in favor of all that. And then all this, a lot of wetlands reworking went on, and that holds the water back. So it's just a beautiful project. But I can't add much except these projects do provide jobs all around the state, excavation, pouring concrete, engineers. So I bet a large project has to be over $200,000, but I have a whole stack of these ones on my desk that are under that. And I bet you could find one in every county that we have in Wyoming. So it's fantastic stuff for Wyoming. A few other things we do rangeland and forest habitat improvements, river restoration we just talked about, wildlife-friendly fencing, water development to ensure clean water, maintenance of our rangeland and open space, and then eradication of invasive species. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to give you folks a little bit of an idea of what this does, when you're going to go into a situation in where I live, because county I reside was named specifically in this, the impacts it'll have. When you're spending dollars on mitigating and potentially reducing the amount of dollars that we're going to spend in fires, when you go underneath these canopies and you start to remove cedar trees and you start to remove a lot of this material that gets it up into the trees, causes crowning and moves on, we're talking about a very small investment here that could be a potential savings and would be a savings. Don't even say potential, because we're looking at a very dry year up in our country. Millions of dollars to the state. When the state of Wyoming starts turning loose seats, single engine tanker planes and helicopters and smoke jumpers and everything in our country and around this state, these are dollars that are spent in an effort, cooperative effort with, like you said, local landowners, different cooperative operations with different entities that are there to try to reduce the extended costs of any potential impacts. So what you're doing is you're investing in range management, which is development of our grass, which is a resource which we use to create food and fiber, protein and fiber. You're reducing your costs on your firefighting problems when you actually do get into a fire season, which we potentially are looking at an incredibly bad fire season in my part of the country. We're talking about multiple, maybe tens of millions or more dollars worth of savings to the state of Wyoming if we will invest and encourage others to invest in taking care of these problems and working to diminish that expense with these dollars. And when we've got an opportunity to work with other entities and landowners, this is not just a give me, this is not a freebie. These folks are putting their dollars in there too to help to bring these costs down, which in long term is a cost savings to this state. So I would appreciate, or I would encourage you to truly consider supporting this piece of legislation, because this is benefits in the long term for this state, because they're going to call on the state budget to fight those fires when they can't handle it when it's out there. So I would encourage you a yes vote on this.
Having the question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that that Senate File 48 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Senate File 48 has passed committee of the whole. We're on to the next bill for consideration, Senate File 47. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 47, sponsored by Minerals, Carbon Storage and Sequestration Liability, an act relating to geological sequestration of carbon dioxide. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 47 engrossed, Carbon Storage and Sequestration Liability. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Duncan, Ayer, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood. Noes, Representative Baer, Gray, Western. Representative Greer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Co-Chairwoman Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill number 47 do pass. And with the explanation, I turn it over to my colleague from District 18.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. Members, 14 years ago, the Wyoming legislature passed framework for we were the first state in the nation to pass framework for ownership, legal liability, and regulatory processes for the storage of carbon dioxide. This Senate File 47 addresses some of the investors' concerned about perpetual liabilities with that storage of CO2. So CO2 storage is designed to be permanent, well beyond the lifetime of a traditional corporation. This bill will establish a process for the state to eventually assume ownership of and liability for carbon dioxide that's injected into geological structures, contingent upon a 20-year period of monitoring following the end of the injection. So the way this starts, the life cycle of a carbon storage facility, they first do a site selection, and that involves a lot of research looking at the geology, the structure, the porosity, and the rock. Once they identify a suitable location, injection begins, and it may last for years or decades, or even 100 years or more. Once that is done, they will close the site, and then this bill proposes a post-closure period of 20 years of monitoring the site to make sure that everything is well before eventually turning over the long-term responsibility to the state. Now, the risk of leakage rises during the injection phase as the pressure in the geological formation increases. It reaches its peak right before closure, because that's the pressure it'll see as it reaches the end of its cycle. And then that's at closure, it'll be at peak pressure, so that's the highest risk. But there will be some residual risk remaining throughout the life of the storage, although it will gradually decrease the longer the term. With the appropriate site assessment and selection, the likelihood of any significant leakage of CO2 is extremely low. Nevertheless, it's impossible to say that there will never be any leakage in all cases. The ultra long-term nature of the containment requirements for CO2 storage make it unrealistic to expect the operators to retain responsibility indefinitely. In fact, I've received a couple of letters of support from industry. They're watching this piece of legislation closely, because as they're looking at investing in Wyoming, they're having a hard time getting project insurance because of the long-term liabilities that they would have to continually report on their financial statements. So let's go into the bill. Line 2, or page 2, is a creation of a new standard. It starts on the bottom of page 1, a creation of a new statute and definition of what is an injector, the role of an injector. And then it gives some of their responsibilities. Then page 3, on lines 9 through, wait a minute. Page 2, lines 13 through 15, it says that injector will hold title. On lines 13 through 15, the injector will hold title for the injected or stored carbon dioxide until the department issues a certificate of completion, which is what we're talking about here. Page 3, lines 9 through 14, as the closure continues, the department will have public hearings and comment periods to make sure that there's no additional concerns from the public that needs to be addressed. In lines 16 through 17, it talks about the 20 years after completion or cessation of all injection operations, 20 years of monitoring before the injector is allowed to make application for the state to take over the liability. On pages 4 and 5, it talks about all the requirements that must be complied with before that can happen. Romanet I, the injector has to be in full compliance. Romanet II or 2, the injector has to address all pending claims regarding the injection and storage of the carbon dioxide. Lines 9 through 13, the underground place or pore space where the carbon dioxide is stored is expected to no longer expand vertically or horizontally and poses no threat to human health, human safety, the environment, or any underground sources of drinking water. Lines 15 through 19, the stored or injected carbon dioxide is unlikely to cross any underground pore space boundary or, again, endanger any drinking water or any human health. And lines 21 through 23, all equipment, all the wells are in good mechanical condition before turning over to the state. On page 5, at the top, Romanet 6, the injector has plugged any injection wells so that the injection of carbon dioxide has ceased and they've plugged that well. There will still be some monitoring wells around the formation to monitor that there's no leakage or ensuing problems. Okay, so upon meeting all of those conditions, they can apply to the state to receive this certificate of project completion. And if they meet all those responsibilities, including the 20-year time period, the primary responsibility and liability for the stored carbon dioxide is transferred to the state. So the title to the carbon dioxide as well as the liability of that stored product is then transferred to the state if their conditions are met, and therefore the injector is forever released, and that's on top of page 6, on line 2 and 3, forever released from any regulatory requirements, and on line 7, their bond or financial assurance is released. So just a little side note on page 6, lines 13 through 15, it says the state will continue to monitor and carry the risk until such time when the federal government assumes responsibility for the long-term monitoring and management of stored carbon dioxide. Now there's no federal management plans at this time. That was just put in there just in case that should happen in the future. So lines or page, the rest of page 6 through 10 is just conforming language. I want to draw your attention to page 13. In page 13, there's a geological sequestration special revenue account created. So as these injectors start injecting CO2 into the formation, they will pay a small fee to the state for the long-term monitoring and the long-term measuring, monitoring, and risk that the state will carry. Now recognize this is very small, but it can grow to be a very large amount of money for the state. It won't happen in our lifetime. We'll probably all be gone by this time. But this may be an account that is a great opportunity for future generations of Wyoming. So with that, members, I bring you this bill, and I urge your support of that. We need to have strong public policy to encourage capital investment in carbon capture and storage infrastructure in Wyoming. We can't reasonably expect a corporation to carry this risk for hundreds and hundreds of years, because they would have to report that on their financial statement each year, not knowing what that risk is. As you know, a corporation has to report any risks to their stockholders. And that would be a line item they would have to carry, and who knows how long those companies will stay in business. We've seen some very large companies go bankrupt in the last few years that none of us ever expected would go bankrupt. So this is an opportunity for the state to pick up that liability. Other countries have done the same thing with long-term liabilities. We have done the same thing with solid waste in our state. So I encourage your support for this. I can't promise you this will be the last CO2 bill you'll ever see, because this is a pathway, and there'll be other opportunities to lead the charge as we develop our opportunities to store CO2. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Majority Floor Leader Sommers.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I support carbon sequestration. It's going to help producers in my area, ultimately the world. We have to figure out how we're going to sequester CO2, carbon. But my question is, my concern, fortunately, it's, I've talked to a lot of people. We're 20 years out, right? We have a good time frame in here. If we see problems arising. But my question remains kind of around the state taking over long-term liability without a bond in place. So just describe some of the discussion. We take over, kind of mines and stuff after a point, but there's always a bond in place. And so tell me a little bit about why we don't keep a bond in place during this period of time. And I assume that there'll be further conversation on this, but I do want to understand, forever's a long time, right? And so I'm just a little concerned on that piece. Thank you.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excellent question. In this piece of legislation is actually visionary on that particular issue, because bonds only stay in place as long as the operator is there. So we're talking about, one, to move carbon capture forward, we have to start establishing the rules and laws around sequestration. State of Wyoming has done a great step forward 12 years ago, identifying who's the owner of pore space with this. So we look at if we get to that point where we're injecting into that formation, it's monitored and it will stabilize. But there are things that happen, they can move. We've got laws in place already to protect landowners. Absolute immunity from liability for landowners who probably are leasing the pore space. Not a bad thing, good thing. So we look at this with the monitoring. It says at least 20 years with that monitoring. The key here, as the good representative said, is the fee. So the state will take over this liability. Sovereign immunity. However, it's sovereign immunity subject to the provisions on page 14, where that pool of money is sitting there for remediation or any damage that can occur. If we look back in the history of industry and certain things in the United States, we see things come to an end. The operators go away, the injector goes away, the parent company is bought and sold 5 or 6 times, and who's left? Bob's LLC. Well, now we're thinking, what happens if Bob's LLC has this? We've got the funds available and we're not coming back and trying to appropriate it out of the general fund. The industry's prepaid it, much like our conservation tax with respect to oil and gas industry. So good question. Hopefully that answers it.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So as you probably the members know, I'm very pro oil and gas and coal and all of our extractive industries. But I just really would ask you to vote no on this bill. When we were in the interim in the Minerals Committee, and I want to say this isn't on the committee at all, and Chairman, who I've loved working with, was really bummed. Second term I was here I wasn't able to serve on the Minerals Committee. Really enjoyed it, and the work is great, but industry really did not come in and weigh in on this bill. Especially when we worked it the second time in the January meeting, and we're up to maybe Bill 15, 16 since I've been a member on carbon sequestration. And one of my questions as a member of the Minerals Committee is where are we on getting this done? On creating some jobs? Update us a little more. How have the previous bills gotten us closer to making this a reality? And so when we don't receive that testimony on a bill like this, it's almost like they're helping us to understand how this is going to help our state. And when they don't come in on something that could contain an enormous cost, I mean, we're taking on the liability here, or at least it appears we are. At one point, it appears to suggest that we're going to continue with the Governmental Claims Act, and then at another point it says that we're taking on this liability. It almost contradicts itself in a couple places. When there's this enormous potential cost down the line, and we really haven't understood from industry what the benefits is, what the scale of the benefits are, I just think we need to keep looking at this and not just go down this path. I was talking with someone about this bill, and they said, hey, if you're going to do this, you should put an amendment on it, put $50 million in the account, because that could be the level of the liability, just as an estimate. And I'm certainly not going to bring that amendment, but I think it is certainly a germane amendment. I mean, why on earth would we take this liability and not fund it? Because it could be quite large. And so I just don't think we're there on this bill. I also have some questions on the wording. I talked a little about this later. I don't think we heard enough from industry on this bill on how this is going to get to the end goals that we want on carbon sequestration. And so I'd ask for no. Thank you.
Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I agree with the representative from Windy City. We've got coal ash pits scattered all over from generation plants that's never been bonded. The state's going to be responsible for filling those up, tens of billions of dollars a pit. And we look into the future. We don't know what the future brings with federal government. They might buy onto it now, and later on, they might want to fine us for having it in the ground. They don't want it in the air. They might not want it in the ground 10 years or 100 years from now. So we'd be paying for that. I'm a no on this. Thank you.
Co-Chairwoman Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had a blank there for a minute. Colleagues, I urge you to remember every time we come into session, what's the one thing we always talk about? Economic diversification. Let's open up and do more for our state. Let's get more bang for our buck. That's what this bill is. Simply put, this is economic diversification. Vote aye.
Mr. Speaker.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So members, I too am interested in advancing opportunities that are supportive of our fossil fuel industries. But there's a couple questions when I look at this that I'm not comfortable enough with the way the current bill, way I understand the current bill. And they come down to, first of all, sequestration. Is sequestration a sole act in itself, or is that an act that we do in conjunction with like an enhanced oil recovery, or is it both? Because where we're putting this is a space, whether it's a pore space or it's a created space by the removal of a hydrocarbon, a liquid hydrocarbon, that is still a space. And it was in 2014, the good chairman of Minerals Committee and a former speaker from my community They did a lot of work in trying to identify that pore space, that opportunity, that void, and provided an ownership structure for it. So when we start talking about this, we're creating pore space with one type of activity, i.e. enhanced oil recovery, and then we have just natural voids, natural pore space. And so what I need to understand is how broadly applicable is this? Now, it's probably quite apparent to the committee members and to the good chairman, but I think myself, I would like to understand that. The second part, or better understand that, the second part that I find a disconnect with the existing law and the new language is who actually owns it. I understand we're assuming a liability, but who is actually owning the compound itself, the CO2 itself? Because in the current statute, it talks about ownership. But when we get to the new language, it talks about title. So my question is there a transfer of ownership, which the current law designates ownership, the one that does the injecting is the owner. Are we transferring, is that title we're talking about ownership, or are we actually transferring the title of liability? And maybe these are very easy questions to answer, but I don't think they're quite as apparent when I read the bill. Because there is just not a nexus between, when I read it, title and ownership between the old language and the new language. The third thing that I'll bring out and ask a question about is this is on page 7, lines 4 through 8, and this is the unitization of pore space. The unitization of pore space is something, of course, we hear about unitization. It's one of the principal responsibilities of that agency in our state that's responsible for the conservation of oil and gas. That is something we have put in statute so that we ensure a most efficient and economical and greatest benefit to our state and our producers when we produce minerals. Now we're talking about the opposite. Now we're talking about the unitization of a property right, pore space, a property right for the benefit of a different purpose. So this is also where sequestration versus enhancement versus just sole sequestration comes in. Because unitization in the context of a oil and gas, I understand, but unitization in the concept of just an open space that we're going to store CO2, I think that is different. So that unitization issue is something, and actually we've just had a fairly, I would say, significant change in our unitization laws in the last couple of years. Changed some of the limitations and things. And then the final thing that I would suggest or just ask us I need to think about more, and maybe the good chairman or colleagues on the committee will be able to line this out fairly quickly for me, is the duration of this, this 20 years with no expansion and all that is really good, but what I guess bothers me more is, trying to get to the right page, Madam Chairman, is on page 6, lines 11 through 15, that we assume this responsibility until such time that the federal government assumes a responsibility. So we are assuming something that we hope somebody else assumes. And I'm not as sure if we're assuming the product or just the liability. And so for me, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll defer to the chairman, certainly, probably has a very clear answer, but as I read the bill and I put it in context of current statute, and it's not all here, there's those questions that I would have. Is this all sequestration or only the enhanced oil? Who has ownership versus what is the title to? Is it liability or the actual CO2? And then as I mentioned, those other two items. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And boy, do I miss having the speaker on the floor to debate with. Good questions. Great questions. First of all, this is this applies only to sequestration. Enhanced oil recovery or use for EORI is not considered a form of sequestration. So as we work within, and it's been the current and the past administration, have worked towards carbon capture and sequestration and have pushed these initiatives forward. And one of those key factors is being, was it 50,000 tons per year ability to sequester when you start looking at these projects. True sequestration, not enhanced oil recovery, which has, and it just varies from field, from the information I know, anywhere from 67% reutilization all the way up to 90%, depending upon the field. So it has nothing to do with enhanced oil recovery. Now, with respect to the issue on title, okay, this was discussed and debated at length, and something that the committee pushed forward as a benefit to the state, because if we were going to assume the liability, we were going to take title. And, you know, on page 5, when you look at starting on line 9, it talks in exchange for assuming the responsibilities, the state title, okay, it says it will transfer without any compensation, shall be transferred to the state. So it's all of the stored, injected carbon dioxide, any facilities be used in the injection, stored carbon dioxide without payment. It talks in terms of title with that. So it is the state taking that over. With respect to the question regarding the federal government, I think we all went into this with the assumption that the state would have this more likely in perpetuity. But there have been discussions about a federal assumption of this particular liability. I cannot answer the question if that means if the federal government were to do this, if they would just assume the liability or they would assume the assets in the liability. I just do not know. So trying here, Mr. Speaker, get back to my scrawling notes on your questions. The issue on unitization, again, was discussed and vetted, and the simple fact is these storage reservoirs are based upon the geology of the formation. So they have to be, it has to be pore space that exists without pushing out oil, or else you do enhanced recovery with it. In the pore space, we don't know how it's shaped. And so the concept of being able to pool this, which is not very favorable, but it's the only way to be able to create a reservoir for this to occur. And so that's where the unitization comes in, is to make sure that if there is a formation and a certain amount of injection into that formation, that you're able to bring everyone into that, so that in essence you're not trespassing. You go through a process for it. You know, the comments, you know, I have a hard time reconciling this with anything to do with coal ash, but the closest I can come is that the fund that's created for this is there to help with that reclamation, should that come down or be necessary at the end of the day. Now, some of my colleagues aren't going to like this comment, but okay, what's the worst case scenario? There's an earthquake and we vent CO2 into the atmosphere? My sugar beets love it. So, you know, the comment from the committee member, and I agree wholeheartedly with him on this. You know, industry was silent, but they have spoken quietly on this particular issue. And I was in a meeting last night where this is a significant component, and it was expressed to me that Wyoming looking at this bill and Wyoming looking forward on these issues is a factor as to why they're looking at Wyoming for development. The problem we have with this, and I'll continue to push, but we've had industry with recent announcements in this sphere that were made public. They're sitting on them. We've got other people in industry that are looking at opportunities, and they're rolling out and gathering capital to be able to come in and move into this space. It is sometimes difficult for industry to be able to come and sit down in our committee and share all of their thoughts in their boardroom discussions with that. And they're going to have to balance that with, if they want good regulation coming out of and steady regulation, with more disclosure. And I do not disagree with those comments at all. So I do hope that I answered most of those questions. If I didn't, the good gentleman from House District 19 can play back cleanup for me.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And so one of the questions I don't think was fully explored was on this 20-year mark on page 3, line 17. And so I've gone back and forth on it. And I guess I'd like some more conversation. I know there's some amendments in the other body about 10 years, and it's really how long before the state, A, assumes liability on one hand, but I guess where I keep reading this and I keep getting hung up is the language says at least 20 years after it ends. And so my ultimate question is, what happens if the department never wants to sign off an issue of project completion? There's nothing in statute that says they have to. It just says they at least have to after 20 years. And I've been around long enough. I'm in no disillusionment. We're not going to re-amend the statute 14 times in the next 20 years. But any language or any conversation about finality when that transfer occurs, because I'm a little bit worried that, we would never sign off on 20 years from now, the world will change a little bit in regards to all of these kind of climate change issues, I keep thinking. And so maybe any kind of a conversation on why the 20 years. I understand there was an amendment in the other body that moved it to 10, and would the sponsor of the bill feel comfortable with a time set certain, not something that says at least? Any comments on that would be appreciated.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The committee, forgive me, but I believe the committee came out with 10 years. The other body moved that to 20, and I think that was, here's the problem with this. Hasn't been done. So that's why the at least 20. And if the formation, if the plume of CO2 is not stable, then I would hope that the department that regulates our environment would say, no, you're not ready. So that's why that discretion is there. I would suspect, and I sincerely hope, because I've spent a great deal of my career pushing forward carbon capture, or CCUS in total, I would hope that in the very near future, that we will start to see this. And it may very well be the case that we come back and say, hey, once this is injected in these formations, we start to see crystallization formation and it sets up, and we can modify those rules. I've heard things from geologists all over the board on this, but the simple answer is we're trying to set a stake in the ground with a regulatory scheme that will encourage this activity, which I think most everybody here agrees with. And that until we do it, till we know exactly what's going to happen, take the safer route in terms of doing this. This is a thing I come back to again. I said this earlier, but just keep in mind, if this just went to the wild, wild west, we'd end up needing a $50 million appropriation, quite possibly for cleanup. But as we do this with the fee and with this clear monitoring and this understanding, we should be in a good position to be able to deal with it if a problem arises. Again, I still take the position of, oh, well, some CO2 got into the atmosphere. I just expended a whole lot here this afternoon.
Representative Heiner, do you need to make some omissions?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So 14 years ago, we began with our legislation about CO2. And that legislation was fantastic. It was state-of-the-art. Many other states, I got to say, mirrored our language. They actually plagiarized it, and they developed their own based on what we did here in this body. Since that's happened, we've fallen a little bit behind the curve. this liability question has already been addressed in other states as well as other countries. And the 20-year, most of the others have resorted to a 5 to 10-year. Industry has asked for a 10-year period. Knowing this body is very conservative, 20 years is what we settled on to make sure that there are no residual problems. And as the good chairman from Minerals mentioned, if there are any leakage problems, or if any question at all, then the state doesn't have to accept that liability and that risk until they're completely and totally confident that it's going to be there forever. Wyoming has some of the best rock in the world for storing CO2. In my part of the state, the reservoir is hundreds of miles in diameter and has been storing CO2 for millions of years. Now it's went through numerous earthquakes, volcanoes, and all sorts of other things, and it still stores that CO2 without any leakage. So site selection is very, very important. But as these companies as industry looks for a place to store CO2, they can't come to Wyoming with the best rock if they have to carry the risk and the liability in perpetuity. Their insurance companies will not allow them to build a plant here because of the indefinite risk that we are asking. So that's what this bill is all about. Members, remember, it may be hard to fathom at this point of time, this is going to be a revenue source for the state of Wyoming. We won't be here, but 50 to 100 years from now, there'll be so much money in this account that the good representative that's a coach will be wanting to tip some of that money into education. And this, as well as the CO2, may become very profitable again. Some of these companies, after 20 years, may decide not to turn over title to us because the carbon dioxide is valuable to them, and they may want to retain ownership. They don't have to turn it over to the state. But if they do that, and 100 years from now we find that the CO2 is valuable for a source of carbon, we have ownership of that. And we can sell it, and we can market it, and we can have this fund that we've accumulated to diversify our economy. I urge you to support this. There will be more efforts in the future to bring industry into our state and diversify our economy.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So thank you for the good explanations. I think there may be a couple of gaps in my understanding still. And so I heard a couple of comments in the most recent speaker about behind the curve, site selection, other states and countries. So what has happened in those other places? Is there storage going on? Is there someone taking advantage of this? Are we actually seeing this deployed? I understand we were ahead of the curve in suggesting this opportunity, but if other folks have got ahead of us, how much further ahead are they? I'm sorry, how much further are they? Is it just the liability, or is it something else that they are further ahead? Actually, is it being practiced? And on the revenue source, and I certainly, the good chairman of revenue wasn't here, but to hear that comment, on the revenue source, this is actually probably this is actually what brought me to be interested in the legislature, is property rights. And pore space, this legislature said, is one of the sticks in the bundle of a property right. One of the sticks in the bundle of property rights. And we have the ability, as if you're a property owner, to sell, lease, reap value from property rights. So my question is, with the unitization language, and the unitization language is something we use in oil and gas for the conservation and production of, how does a individual who's being unitized unwillingly get value out of this unless 40 or 50 years from now, their heirs and assigns, somebody decides, oh, that CO2 is worth something, we're going to start pumping it out of the ground. Because if in your unitization of an oil and gas lease, there is production that generates revenue, and the folks that have that property right, they will get income from that. So how does it work in reverse? How does it work in reverse? And I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an easy answer. Is it some average value? I know we've had bills that talked about average values and different things like that, but I'm personally, I'm concerned that the unitization thing, for me, is probably the linchpin. I will likely bring an amendment just to strike that piece. Because I think if you're going to assume or you're going to ask someone to use their property for your purposes and then want to back out of that liability, whether it's 20 or 30 or 40 years later, that doesn't make sense to me. Because guess what? It's still my or your pore space that liability associated with. How do you gain value out of that? The final thing is the extraction thing, and I'm glad, I don't remember who brought it up, but when it comes back out of the ground, if it became a valuable commodity and somebody came along and said, my word, we need this. And I get that. I think we should keep our options open. Then how does the value get assumed? Does it all go to the federal government? We already have a frustration with the 70% of our state's minerals that are under federal control. State? Management by the state? If the state has assumed liability, and like I said, I want that title. If I bring an amendment on second or third reading, it'll say title of ownership, not just title. Title of ownership, because that's what current statute talks about, is ownership, not title. And maybe it needs to be clarified in both places. So how do you get that how does that work in the end? Because that's what my question is, how do you get value going in if you're unitized? How do you get value coming out for anybody, including the state? Even if the federal government took it, the state had a liability in that over time too, for 20-some years. So just questions. I appreciate that there's been good work done on this. I appreciate it. It's a midway on a long road maybe, but there's some questions that I have still, even with the good explanations, that I'll continue to listen for options with. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple things I wanted to say on this. We're pushing back a little bit on two speakers ago and responding to the point from the speaker previously, the question he raised, how far are we, quote unquote, behind on this? My understanding from the testimony is there's one state that we're trying to catch up to, and that's North Dakota, that basically has the statute on the books. It's one state. And I would agree with the speaker that we're just, this isn't quite there. So I'd urge a no and just wanted to answer that question. Thank you.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just to answer some of those questions, you could look at Sask Power, which is the Saskatchewan Power Company, their Boundary Dam project. They're collecting and injecting and sequestering CO2. They've been doing it for a while, kind of a world-class project. I think all of you have seen the announcement that came out from the Wyoming Energy Authority that a company is looking here in this part of the state to be able to bring in and inject carbon dioxide here. And one of their reasons is through the legislature a while back, we gave our DEQ the ability to permit Class 6 wells, which are these injection wells. And that's why they're looking, because they can come here and do it. It's either here or another state. So I think there's some real opportunities for us. We have companies who are now coming in looking because of that ability to inject in Class 6 wells, which are the injection wells for CO2. And I think you'll see more companies. There's a project to produce hydrogen in the southwest corner of the state out of the old oil fields, and then sequester the carbon dioxide and sell the hydrogen going to the West Coast. So the projects are coming, again, because of work we've done in the past, the foundations we've laid in doing these steps at a time. This is the next step. And it's some things we need to do to give companies some certainty in how they operate. So if you want to look at projects that are already gone on, that's a few I can name off the top of my head. Thank you.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to make the speaker feel as comfortable as possible. One, title's the same as ownership. It's nuanced. It's not an issue. Okay. Second of all, go ahead and open your green books and look at 3511-313, which deals with carbon sequestration permits required. That's the reference to the unitization. And the provision that's within the bill simply says that carbon sequester pursuant to this is not subject to eminent domain. It's another layer of protection for landowners. It is not in any attempt to shortchange a landowner. Okay, with respect to the other, I think we've heard this, and it isn't just North Dakota. There are other states that are looking at this that makes, in some respects, makes more sense when you start looking at carbon capture off of manufacturing facilities, and those are around the Gulf Coast areas. What do we have in Wyoming? As was said by the other member of Minerals, we have geology in our favor. Okay, when we start talking about some of the other opportunities of the state with respect to hydrogen, only going to work if you can put it with carbon capture, sequestration. We want to keep our coal plants burning, carbon capture, sequestration. Where is this being deployed? This is moving. This is a moving area. Would I love to see this go into effect tomorrow? You bet, I would. The simple fact of the matter is there is a groundswell, and we look at this, and this is a great example. 10 years ago, the University of Wyoming did a study in the Rock Springs uplift. Okay, they mapped that whole area to see what its characteristics were for carbon sequestration. They did all of that mapping. At the time, the price of CO2 went through the roof because we started getting some EORI development within the state. So we couldn't afford the CO2 to test that formation, but yet companies are using that information, taking that, doing some of their own modeling off of it, and using that to go out with a perspective to say, here's the geology in Wyoming, and here's why we need to be bringing these things to Wyoming to develop, because we know this. That work that was done 10 years ago on that modeling, the work that was done 12, 14 years ago on defining some of these things are leading us to a point now where we're at this crossroads where you see, and I don't know about you, but I read about 15 articles a morning in the energy space. There is a tremendous amount of buzz about some of the things that Wyoming sits at the crossroads of. The hydrogen, okay? Nuclear, rare earth minerals, carbon capture. Believe it or not, there are a lot of NGOs out there that think that enhanced oil recovery is a very, very good thing because the footprint doesn't get spread any further as opposed to do drilling. So, is this legislation going to get amended or changed down the road? I guarantee you it will. I would be absolutely shocked. But passing this legislation right now, and it doesn't have any of the harmful side effects, the concerns that are out there that have been expressed, is sending a message out to industry, to investors, that Wyoming is ready to do this. So I would encourage an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Yin.
Madam Chair, my apologies if this has been asked, but the good chairman of Minerals said that the worst that could happen would be that we vent CO2. And I'm curious on whether in 30 years or after we certificate that it's past their required date for the entity that stored it, could the entity that paid the company to store CO2 sue the state? So is there a fiscal liability if we vent CO2 that was promised to be sequestered permanently? I don't want to mortgage our future. So if that could be answered, thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All this talk has reminded me of, I think it was 2010, that Wyoming drilled a $1 million well that they were going to sequester carbon underneath the Rock Springs Dome. And I think the chairman might remember that. And I was just wondering and maybe both chairmen remember that. And maybe there's did we learn anything from that besides we did found a bunch of lithium, but the attempt was to sequester carbon. I was just wondering if there's any history that we could learn from. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The good speaker previously said something, I apologize. I'll bring it up in a minute. Right now, carbon dioxide, if you go buy it, is worth $3.50 a kilogram. You can figure that out on a long ton, or the metric ton times that 2,000 if you want a ton of carbon dioxide. That's what it's worth to buy it. So I've worked in an enhanced oil recovery facility that has had a well blowout with carbon dioxide. And frankly, it was much less than you'd ever picture a well blowout being. In fact, I wouldn't even call it a blowout. It vented. We shut some valves. We did a little bit of work. It quit. And that facility, in some ways, does sequester because they still have to buy carbon dioxide on the market. They've been doing that for the last, I think it's close to 40 years now. And so some stays in the ground. It's not coming back. It solidifies, turns into carbonates, calcium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate. You use those to cook cakes with, by the way, if any of you bake. So it's no different. It stays in there as a crystal structure. And may I have a privilege of the floor, Madam Chairwoman?
You may have a privilege.
It's related to this. Thank
Great.
you. There is no recoverable lithium in Wyoming. Out of 30,000 samples, they have about the same amount as seawater. So please, I get that question constantly, and it's just kind of a sore point with me. We always talk about we have lithium, we don't. So out of 30,000 samples, one had lithium in it, and the rest are about equivalent seawater. Thank you for the privilege.
Have we emitted all of the carbon dioxide we can? With the question being called, all those in favor of Co-Chairwoman Duncan's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 47 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Senate File 47 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 19. Oh, I'm sorry. Chairman Wilson, would you like a privilege?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like a privilege of the floor.
Great, you can have one.
She lost track because I told her maybe it would be tomorrow afternoon before I got around to asking her privilege of the floor. Now that we have all heard this, sat there listening to this wonderful bill, we might like a chance to stand up. I've got some constituents of mine up in the North Gallery. I don't usually get constituents here because they're so busy working here in the Capitol and in the city. But anyway, the Taylor family is up there, and three of the kids, if they want to stand up, Bison, Ava, and Slade, have been coming to the legislature every year since they were born. The poor folks. I don't know, they might, hopefully one of these days they'll take over me, but Bison's a senior at Cheyenne Central and is getting ready to go into the Air Guard next year. And kudos for that. Plays hockey, lacrosse, traveling to Atlanta in April to participate in Deca Nationals. Ava's a sophomore at Cheyenne Central and plays soccer and golf, straight A student. Just turned in her silver credentials for her congressional award. And Slade in 7th at Cheyenne McCormick. And he also plays hockey and lacrosse and earned a spot on the statewide hockey team. Awesome, also straight A's, so they're also all youth volunteers for Cheyenne Frontier Days. And maybe when they get their driver's license, they'll be able to park across the highway and come back and forth on that thing we talked about yesterday. Anyway, if you'll welcome them, please.
Representative Ottman,
Yes, Madam Chairman, thank you. Privilege of the floor.
you have a privilege of the floor.
Okay, in the South Gallery, I would like to say, someone just arrived who is very precious to me. The love of my life, my partner and my best friend, my husband, Larry Ottman.
Representative Walters, would you like a privilege?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for the privilege. Just an announcement that the Joint Conference Committee for Senate File 67, the Capital Construction Bill, will meet at 4:30 today in room 301, the JAC room. So again, that's Senate File 67 at 4:30 today.
All right, we're on to the next bill for our consideration, Senate File 19. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 19, sponsored by Revenue. County Optional Property Tax Refund Program, an act relating to taxation and revenue. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred Senate File 19, County Optional Property Tax Refund Program, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Gray, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Jennings, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yin. Representative Harshman, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Harshman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with a recommendation that Senate File 19 pass, and to turn the explanation of the bill over to our good colleague from House District 16.
Representative Yin.
Madam Chair, thank you. I bring you Senate File 19, County Optional Property Tax Refund Program. So members, we have a statewide property tax refund program. This is something that I discussed during our budget amendments. The statewide program is a means-tested program. It depends on both your income and your asset level. The income depends on the median income of your county. And I sent this morning, again, the spreadsheet of who has taken advantage of the statewide program. I also sent a link to the Department of Revenue's brochure of what those requirements were when they last funded it in 2019, when we last funded it as a legislature in 2019. So before you is a county optional version of that exact same program. It refers to the statewide program a lot because I tried to match exactly the asset levels and the income levels of that program, just to match the constitutionality of our existing program. So the biggest difference in the county program is that it's a county optional program and one that the county has to fund out of its own county revenues. This is a way for a county in times of high tax growth, property tax growth in a county, that they can help protect those members that are at high risk of getting pushed out of their homes because of property tax liabilities. So you're on a fixed income, you've been able to pay your property taxes, but then all of a sudden your property taxes rise. This is a way to keep some of those folks in their home and have a county be able to do it with some of the excess county property tax that they get. So I'll go over some of the differences, but in many cases it's the same. Essentially on page 2, it's enabling the county option, and then you go to the treasurer and the timing of that, and you provide, for proof of it, you provide an affidavit. This is very similar to what the Department of Revenue already does, the same program with our statewide program. And one additional thing on a requirement on this program is on the bottom of page 2. I wanted to make sure, because this isn't in our statewide program, that this doesn't apply to second homeowners. It applies to specifically people that are truly at risk of losing their primary home. So at the bottom of page 2, there's a 9-month requirement in the preceding calendar year, which is the year that the tax refund would apply to. On page 3, it talks about the income requirements, 3/4 of the median income. And then on page 4, it talks about the asset requirements. The county has a little bit of flexibility here. If they want to be stricter than the statewide requirements, they can have that. So if they want to if they don't have enough funds to fund everyone that would fit within the statewide programs requirements, they can have a stricter county requirement, so the income and asset limits are tighter than what the state allows. This way, we're not allowing them to give more money, give it to more people, which could test the constitutionality of the program itself. The limit is essentially the statewide's constitutional limits. And then the rest of page 4 talks about when the tax refund would be paid, as well as how much, which is not to exceed 1/2. Again, this is exactly the same as the statewide program. And on page 5, it's just an assertion that, again, the refund only comes out of county revenues. The state will not be paying for a county's optional program. And 2, it doesn't affect assessment of property values at all, and that the county shall implement rules to promulgate it. I've talked to the Department of Revenue about this particular bill as well. If a county decides to do pretty much exactly the same rules as the state, there's a possibility that the Department of Revenue will be able to help a county out in administering it, because essentially the forms will be exactly the same. So there's no reason for a county to re-implement if the rules are exactly the same. That isn't a guarantee, but that's something where, some of our smaller counties, which may not have the funds to administer their own program, would, at least on the administration side, be able to get some help on handling that. And that is the bill, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there any discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Harshman's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 19 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate File 19 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 27. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 27, sponsored by Judiciary. Dissolution of County Boards Authority, an act relating to counties. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 27 engrossed. Dissolution of County Boards Authority. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Burt, Clausen, Duncan, Ayer, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Excused, Representative Blackburn. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Swanitzer?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move in the committee of the whole rise report. It does so with the recommendation that Senate File 27 do pass. And if there is a standing committee amendment, I will also turn it over to the good representative from Johnson County to explain the bill.
Representative Crago.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Members, I bring to you Senate File 27. Essentially what this bill is, during the interim, committee number 1 ends up reviewing Supreme Court opinions. And one of those opinions dealt with one of our county boards, in particular it was a fair board. And so what the Supreme Court determined, what our good friends down the street determined, was that there isn't necessarily a statutory provision for counties or our county commissioners on the local level to dissolve some of these boards that are created by statute. In other words, once they're created, they're there forever. And there's no way to get rid of them or to dissolve them, even if there's a good reason to do so. And so what this bill does is it creates a procedure for doing that. It has a notice and hearing requirement. There's a very detailed process that your county commissioners back home can use to get rid of, dissolve a board if necessary. I believe we're going to see a couple amendments coming that deals with putting some sideboards on that, really on what are the reasons they could dissolve a board. But the bill as it came out of committee simply gives a process for doing that for all of the different kinds of boards that are created by your county commissioners. This would not apply to your special districts that are created by vote, by your electorate, only to those that are created by vote of the county commissioners. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, I'd be I'll attempt to answer them.
We have some committee of the whole amendments. Representative or Majority Floor Leader Sommers.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And I would like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 27, ask for your favorable consideration. And so what this amendment does, first let me talk about what this bill does. And I understand what the good bringer of the bill said, but a couple of the boards that are being contemplated, and you can see it by the way they were, the way they're brought in from the statute. A couple of the boards, one being a museum board, one being a recreational board. It's this, if you create these things, so for example, with the historical, with the museum board, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, each Board of County Commissioners of any county owning, constructing, or acquiring any museum or collection of exhibits shall appoint a board. Okay, it's not may appoint a board, it shall appoint a board. And the same thing is true on recreation boards. If you create these recreational services, you shall create a board. So we have to ask ourselves, why would you do that? You know, why do you do that? And so now we're taking that away. And so this First Amendment, what you're seeing from me is a museum board. I think if a county owns a museum or owns collections, that they should appoint a board, that they shall appoint a board, because I think boards that are appointed by county commissioners that are, you might say they are people that are, you know, most likely have an interest in history, interest in museums. There's subject matter experts, for example, or sit on these boards. I think there's a reason to maintain that board. And I think particularly the museum board. And then in the Second Amendment, I'm not going to go there yet, but I think there needs to be sideboards on any of the boards that are removed, that are taken away by a county commission. And so my first amendment, and I just mentioned it, is it deletes 1810-103. And 1810-103 is that piece of statute. It basically takes out the museum board and says that it will remain as it is now. They shall appoint one if they have these collections. And I know in the bill that it says that, you know, the county commissioners have to respect the collections and that sort of thing. But I just don't like the idea of losing that museum board into the inner workings of a county commission without any cause. The way the bill's written now, without any cause other than a public meeting.
Representative Stith.
Madam Chairman, just for the bringer of the amendment, I just have a question to ask. I think the argument's interesting, but if we're going to exempt museum boards, why not exempt airport boards too, and fair boards, and why have the bill? I mean, you know, why should there be a special exception for museum boards? Why are they different? Because it seems to me that dissolving an airport board would be a sort of a far more serious kind of action to take. But so, you know, I'm new to this discussion. Second question, follow up: how many county museum boards actually exist? If anybody knows.
Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Well, for one thing, on a fair board, for example, in statute, they may appoint currently. And so to me, if you may appoint, then you definitely should have a way to get rid of that one where it's a may appoint. Where it's a shall appoint, I just have an issue with that.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I tend to agree with the good representative out of Rock Springs at this point. I'd like to trust a little bit of the committee's work. And I know that when I come out of committee and I bring a bill forward, especially through the interim, that the bill has been worked. The bill has gone through some significant consideration. And you know, when this bill came out of the committee, you know, from Judiciary's committee, I feel like they probably had this discussion. I feel like they probably went through the level of boards that should or should not have this capability, should or should not be able to be dissolved. And so I respect the good majority floor leader bringing this discussion, because I think this is the place to have it, where we have 60 voices to have this. But, you know, another body down the hall also had this discussion as well. And I just think that this is a situation where you've had a committee vet this bill, and this is just a little bit a step too far, in my opinion. I think that if we're going to exempt one, we need to continue exempting them all, and that's exactly what's gotten us into this situation. So I'd say on and against.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to maybe speed up a little time here, the on and for the amendment, your good committee number one has actually worked this amendment with conjunction with the majority floor leader and the association that represents your counties. And honestly, we have no issue with this amendment. We think it's a good amendment. Thank you.
Representative Crago.
Madam Chairman, I would also urge an aye vote. I think part of the problem is we're going to have a little bit of conflicting language if we leave museums within the bill. We can always come back and talk about that a different day. And there's some policy considerations that probably go into that. But right now, if we leave museums within the bill, we are going to have some conflicting language within our statutes. So I would urge an aye vote on the amendment.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. If anybody else would like to eat some crow with me, I'll have some over at my desk. So vote aye.
Would you like to eat some crow, Representative or Majority Floor Leader? Great. All right, question having been called, all those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, say aye. Those opposed, no. All right, the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted, and we are on to Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Madam Chairman, I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to Senate File 27 and ask for your favorable consideration. So in the original bill, or the way the bill was written, really all it took was public notice and a meeting to dissolve these boards. And so I said to myself, you know, I just don't think that's the way it should happen. And I take for example a fair board. So if you were in an area that had a really large population, and maybe they, and I'm not saying what community or any community, but let's just say that there was a county commission that didn't have maybe the ag values you would think that maybe they would have, but they appoint a fair board that has those 4-H ag values associated with it, and then a county commission for no reason decides they really want to just absorb that board for whatever reason. I don't know what the reason would be. I think there should at least be sideboards put on that and a greater discussion to take place. And so with that, I've moved this amendment. And so what you'll see is in Romanet I, boards or districts specified in this subsection shall be dissolved only for one or more of the following reasons. A, the purpose for which the board was created no longer exists. Okay, you have a recreation board, you're no longer doing those activities, you get rid of it. A majority of the appointed board members determined that it's in the best interest, so the board agrees that it should go away. And then C, the board has neglected or refused to perform duties, the board is engaged in criminal conduct, the board is engaged in malfeasance or misuse of funds, or F, and so this is, I think, will help county commissioners that want to get rid of a board. The county commissioners determine for financial reasons that it is in the best interest of the inhabitants of the county that the board or district be dissolved and liquidated. And so that's kind of what this does. It puts some sideboards out there. I think it requires a little more discussion. And certainly there could be other A, B, C's, or D's, but I do think there needs to be a reason that you get rid of the board other than just a a public notice, particularly other boards that were shall require in statute.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Unfortunately, against the amendment, and I like the intent and where it's going, but I just think if this amendment was in statute, we would never have resolved the issue which existed in my county, which led to this Supreme Court case, which led to this bill. And maybe, you know, the way around this is right now in statute, the county commissioners can get rid of any board member on their appointed boards, you know, individually. So I would assume if maybe a majority of the appointed board members determined it wasn't in the best interest, the county commissioners could remove members one by one until they had one left. And so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that if the county commissioners have the authority to remove members at their own will, why they can't take out a board. And so asking you to vote no on the amendment, but perhaps something that does put more sideboards, because I understand where the good majority floor leader is coming from, but I do think this negates the bill if it were to be put on as an amendment.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I rise in opposition. We heard this in committee. Simply put, if the county commissioners can create these boards, they should be able to dissolve the boards. The 6 boards that we heard about, they either got absorbed into into a department that was already in existence, or it was no longer relevant. It outgrew its purpose. So if you look at the fiscal note, it's quite interesting. It's $750. So really, this is just turning around and giving the commissioners the latitude to dissolve a board that they created, full circle, being able to do what's best and most efficient for their counties.
Representative Larson.
Thank you. I really like this amendment. I really think that this bill is necessary. I think to the points that the young attorney from up in the Valley of Buffalo mentioned, but I think it leaves out some components there. It's not that this Board of County Commissioners created this board. It could be a board that county commissioners 3 or 4 decades ago created, and there needs to be a mechanism there with some sideboards that say, why are you dissolving this, other than you read it in the paper and then there's a public hearing. There should be some justification. The public may like this board and the commissioners may not like it. And so if the public likes it, there should be some justification as to why the dissolution of the board needs to take place. And so I like this, but I do have a further question, and maybe my good colleague over here could answer that. When you were having this discussion, I think the other part that is a little concerning to me is if there was some wrongdoing or something that the commissioners were concerned about that warrants the dissolution of the board, shouldn't there be a requirement that the commissioners reach out to the board and have that discussion and say, you've done X when you should have done Y, and so now we're going to dissolve the board, and allow the commissioner or allow the board then to respond and try to justify their actions or do something. Now, we can make the assumption that that's, and probably with some accuracy, that that's going to happen, but it's not required. And so I'm just wondering if there was any conversation as you talked about this in committee on making sure that we're not, because they're not just all vacant boards that just need to go away. I think we've opened a door here and are giving the commissioners authority that they certainly do need, but they could also, there could be a little mischief take place here from time to time. And so just curious on those conversations, and I would urge an aye on this amendment.
Representative Crago.
Madam Chairman, thank you. So I'll answer the good representative's question regarding discussion in committee. We really didn't talk about that, but I think we believe that was sort of a given, that you're not going to get to the point of dissolving one of these boards until there's typically some sort of conflict, which for me actually gave me a little bit of heartburn in the bill as it came out of committee. I'm very happy to see this amendment, because without the amendment, I felt like we get into a place where the action may become political. And we may have one current board of county commissioners that says, we don't want this particular type of board, whether it be a fair board, museum board, rec board, whatever that kind of board is. And they have decided that particular commission, they don't like it. And so they're just going to dissolve it. What this amendment does is makes them give a valid reason for why, makes them hold a hearing on that reason, and lets the public come and comment on the reason why they believe the board should be dissolved. Otherwise, I think the procedure gets very abstract, and we don't know why. We wouldn't necessarily know why they're just wanting to dissolve the board. They just publish in the newspaper that they want to dissolve the board, and that's where it goes. This, as the good bringer of the amendment said, gives it some sideboards, gives them a reason, and I believe takes the politics out of any particular situation. So if there is a really good reason why we no longer need the board, it should fall under one of these reasons listed within the amendment, and it should provide for a good discussion going forward at the county level.
Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess somewhat ambivalent to the amendment, but I want to provide some clarification for the body because I think it may be a little confusing in that the amendment doesn't provide for that process. That process already exists under the Procedures Act in Wyoming. So yes, let's say take this amendment away and think about the process right now. The county wants to dissolve a board. It's going to put it in the newspaper, and then it is going to have a public meeting on that topic. And at that meeting, I presume that is, so I guess to the good appropriator, I think the statement was made that we would presume that this would happen. No, law requires that this happens. There will be a notice, there will be a meeting, and all parties, commissioners, the board, and the public will all be at that meeting if they are interested to discuss the topic. I appreciate where the additional conversation is going, which is there some way to somehow let this board know in advance of that notice? This amendment doesn't do that. Keep that in mind. That may be a future amendment, but I really don't know how that works, because in my mind, you wouldn't want to have that conversation in the dark or in isolation. You want to have it in a public meeting. That's why we have that's why we have the procedure in statute on what it should look like. So I don't think anything's wrong with that process where you notice whatever the issue is to be discussed by the commissioners, and there is a meeting, and then all three parties, the public being one of them, has the ability to come and comment. And so I think that is the process with or without this amendment. As far as the amendment substance goes, I mean, really the question for the body is, do you think that your commissioners should have the authority to dissolve what they create? It's that simple, yes or no. And that was the question for the Judiciary Committee, is there was ambiguity in the law. You may create it, you shall create it, but then how do you take it away? Our job, following up on that Supreme Court opinion, was simply just to clarify that, well, if you create it, certainly you must have the authority to take it away. Now, whether you believe there should be parameters on whether you can take it away, to me, that would also beg the question of, well, then should you have parameters on when you can and can't create it? And that's not what the statute does right now. So I do think, that's a question for the body to decide how you weigh on it. The committee, I think, would be fairly ambivalent. We never discussed in the committee whether there should be these types of sideboards. Again, our question was to just clarify the Supreme Court opinion. Yes, if you create something, you have the authority to take it away. But I just want the body to be clear on this whole process in terms of procedure. This amendment doesn't address that. You already have that process in statute if a county commission wants to dissolve a board. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Representative Knapp, and then Washington.
Madam Chairman, thank you. The problem, I think, is it is ambiguous, even with the sideboards. Being a former county commissioner, and this did actually happen in my county, where certain boards were decided to be, what's the word? They were needed to get advice from the community, but not necessarily needed in the budget process or the fiduciary responsibilities. So if you look at cities today, cities have boards also, but every single one of those boards are advisory boards. They serve at the pleasure of the city. They like to have public input, but the ultimate decision goes to those that are elected. And I think that's one key here. The state uses counties as an arm of state government, so commissioners follow state law. So if the state sets up boards, that's one thing. But if commissioners set up boards, to me, it's the same as cities. Those boards serve as a link to the community to say, what would you like in a rec center? What would you like to have in the museum? How does that function? But when you start to get into a position where the boards hire and fire the director, yet the commissioners give fiduciary responsibility to the director, but have no way of hiring or firing, that becomes an issue. So I think where money is involved and a commission is granting money to basically a department, which is run by a director, the board becomes advisory. It shouldn't become a situation where that link between the commissioners and their director is dissolved, because that does cause problems of ambiguity. And the amendment that deals with for cause, that is also ambiguous to say whether a board is insubordinate, or it becomes ambiguous in that regard, and who is the judge of that? So you have a meeting between the commissioners and the public and the board, and there's all this communication going on. Who ultimately decides, well, that board was needing to be let go? So it's a complicated issue, or it's a simple issue. And to me, the cities handle it in a simple way, involve the community, have those boards in place, but they are distinct advisory boards. Thank you.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My concern has to do with the allegation of criminal misconduct, where we have a board under this amendment. There's a belief that they've engaged in some criminal misconduct. The wheels of justice move slowly. There may be an investigation underway, but your board of county officials might already understand and have a pretty good idea that there was criminal misconduct committed by this board. Do you want them doing a public hearing in the middle of that investigation while the sheriff or whoever is still conducting the investigation, gathering evidence, interviewing people, and so forth? So I have a little bit of heartburn about having a situation where we're forcing the county commissioners to wait until either the criminal investigation is done before they try to dissolve the board, and allowing people to remain in this board during this time after the commissioners are aware that there may be serious criminal misconduct, right? While we await the ultimate outcome of the criminal investigation. So that's my only real heartburn with the amendment.
Representative Ayer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a brief thought to share with everyone. I think not only in this amendment, but way too often when we're discussing local units of government, we have way too little faith in school boards, in county commissions, in town councils. And we far too often create boogeymen where no boogeymen exist. I'm against the amendment. Thank you.
Representative or Majority Floor Leader, would you like to talk on any of the boogeymen?
Madam Chairman, thank you. So here's one of the boards that's being dissolved, and there, you know, the one, there was the statement about, well, why, you know, if you create the board, you dissolve the board, you know, what's the reason for a board? Should it be an advisory board? And just to understand recreational facilities. So the governing body of any city, town, county, or school district, either independently or jointly through any combination thereof, may establish a system of public recreation, may establish. And if it does so, shall appoint a board of trustees, shall appoint a board of trustees. So there's laid out reasons, and you can go on through the statute, why you shall appoint and what you shall appoint. And so we're basically taking away that whole piece of law and going, it's all right, you just dissolve when you want to dissolve. And I think if you're going to create these things, right, you're creating facilities. You're creating programs that could have been in place for years. And on the whim of that's why the statute was created. So it's not on a whim when you dissolve it. And I am totally local control. And I think a board appointed by a county commission is even more local control than the county commission, frankly. And so I would urge your support of the amendment.
Sensing we're ready for, Chairman's Wanitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have to push back a little. So, and the issue, it's right there on the second line of the amendment, right? The purposes for which the board was created no longer exist or have been fulfilled. If you're going to dissolve a board, and that board doesn't want to be dissolved, they will take you to court and they will say, we still have a purpose and it hasn't been fulfilled, which is exactly the issue we had in our county. And so I would submit to you, let's say the county does in fact dissolve a board, what happens? Well, any responsibilities left for that requirement under 18.9.101, which let me just read to you, right? They may appoint a board of trustees to control, manage, and maintain fairgrounds, airports, parks, and pleasure grounds. Not exactly sure what a pleasure ground is, and nor do I know of any county commissioners that have appointed, guardians of a pleasure ground, but that exists. But let's say they take it back, right? Let's say you have an airport board, people get upset, they dissolve that authority then goes back to the county commissioners. So they have to be ready to accept, whatever may be going on, that then if there's a problem in the community that's leading to them dissolving this board, the county commissioners inversely have to be ready to accept, any repercussions of that goes back to them. And maybe in some cases they want that. I just think with the amendment, it makes it litigious that a board that doesn't want to be dissolved is going to say they have not been fulfilled and that'll be taken to court. And again, where my tipping point is, if you can take off every member of that board so it doesn't exist, why can you not take out the board as an entity and then it reverts to the county commissioners? Because it's not a shall, it's a may. Each board of county commissioners may acquire lands and property for fairgrounds, airports, parks, and pleasure grounds. So they're not required to do this. They voluntarily set up a board. They can voluntarily take out the board, in my mind, and that's where I got to through 2 committees on this bill.
Representative Crago.
Madam Chairman, just in response to the statement from the former speaker that the county commissioners can remove any member from one of these boards, they actually have to have cause, which is in 18.9.102H. And so to get rid of the members, you have to have a reason. And so what we're saying here is, okay, if you have to have a reason to get rid of a member, you should probably have to have a reason to get rid of the board. And I actually think it will help reduce litigation. And the reason being is, even if we don't pass this amendment, the people who don't want the board to be dissolved are still going to sue you. What this amendment does is allows you to build a record. Here's why we're dissolving you. Here's the record. Here's why it should happen. Without this amendment, there isn't going to be much of a record, and there won't be much to stand on when you go to court. I think it actually does the opposite and will help prevent future litigation.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when I view this, I don't necessarily view it as a board of trustees for these are departments. So when you have a Board of County Commissioners, the airport is a department. It's not a separate legal entity, as is the library, the museum. They're not separate legal entities, so they're not Board of Trustees, they're boards. The only case that happens in, for us, is if you have a joint powers board. It's a separate legal entity. Those board members are selected, but that truly is a separate board. Separate fiduciary, we give basically a block grant. That board is in charge of that particular department. The rest of these are simply departments in a county. The boards act as a budgetary advisory board. They act as the programming board, but it's not a separate legal entity or a board of trustees. So if we want to create that by statute, I think we should. But if we don't, those should be relegated as departments, and those boards would serve as an advisory board.
Are we ready to close this discussion board? Question having been called, all those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. That amendment has passed. All right, having been called division, all those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. That amendment has failed, 19 aye, 32 no. We are back on the bill. Question being called, all those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer's motion that when the Committee of the Whole arises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 27 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Senate File 27 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for, Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
Reading clerk, please read the Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 32, do pass amended. Senate File 10, do pass. Senate File 48, do pass. Senate File 47, do pass. Senate File 19, do pass. Senate File 27, do pass amended. Representative Provenza, Chairman.
Chairman Provenza.
I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The report is adopted. Congratulations, Chairman Provenza. Standing committee reports. Can I do some?
Senate File 55, sponsored by Blockchain. Insurance Sandbox, an act relating to insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 55 engrossed, Insurance Sandbox, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Duncan, Air, LeBeau, Roscoe. Noes, Representatives Clausen, McGuire, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
Messages? Okay, we're at that old order of business of signing of enrolled acts. The first enrolled act is Senate 7.
Senate Enrolled Act 7 being original Senate File 59. An act relating to public funds, authorizing investment of the Wyoming Game and Fish Fund as specified, making a conforming amendment and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act 7 being original Senate File 59. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 8.
Senate Enrolled Act 8 being original Senate File 58. An act relating to the Wyoming Council for Women's Issues, placing the Council for Women's Issues within the Department of Workforce Services, transferring authority positions, property, equipment, and funding for the Council for Women's Issues from the Wyoming Business Council, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 8 being original Senate File 58. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act number 9.
Senate Enrolled Act 9 being original Senate File 57. An act relating to courts, amending requirements for fulfilling Chancery Court vacancies, amending persons qualified for temporary assignment of Chancery Court duties, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 9 being original Senate File 57. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 10.
Senate Enrolled Act 10 being original Senate File 46. An act relating to the prioritization of municipal solid waste facilities, cease and transfer projects, authorizing expenditure of previously appropriated funds, establishing a prioritized list of projects, establishing a maximum amount to be expended on projects, granting the Department of Environmental Quality limited discretionary authority to modify the prioritized list, specifying expenditures for a carcass management project, providing definitions, requiring reports, repealing a prior list of priorities, cease and transfer projects, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 10 being original Senate File 46. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act, Senate 11.
Senate Enrolled Act 11 being original Senate File 45. An act relating to defense forces and affairs, requiring an annual report as specified and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 11 being original Senate File 45. I have so signed. Messages from the Senate.
Message 209. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 4, Water Permits Livestock on Federal Land. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form by the as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 210. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 7, Commercial Vehicle Driving Disqualification. Ayes 30. Message 211. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 17, Veterans Facilities Surrounded by Grazing. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 212. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 33, Community Health Services Continued Redesign Efforts. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 213. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 47, Local Impact Assistance Payments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 30. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 214. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 52, Timeline to Prepare and Process Absentee Ballots. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 20, noes 10. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 215. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 65, County Tax Protest, Filing Date. Ayes 30. Message 216. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 79, Employment Support Fund Amendments. Ayes 29, noes 1. Message 217. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 80, Campaign Reports Amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 22, noes 8. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 218. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 87, Insurance Investments Amendments. Ayes 28, noes 2. Message 219. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 88, Name Change Notice Publication of Minors Amendment. Ayes 30. Message 220. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 108, Funeral Services Practitioner Amendments. Ayes 30. Message 221. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 110, Board of Psychology Behavior Analysis Regulation. Ayes 29, noes 1. Message 222. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 125, Workplace Injury Assistance, Information and Guidance. Ayes 22, noes 8. Message 223. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 42, Local Government Distributions. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 25, noes 5. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader. That clears the desk. If you have announcements, please start lining up, queuing up. First, I'd like to take the Majority Floor Leader's motion because I hope he's going to adjourn us. And if he's not, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And first, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give you the Committee of the Whole list for Monday. And it'll be 101, 102, 43, 8, 3, 73, 80, 53, 77, and 81. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. Monday, the 7th day of March, 2022.
Announcements. We'll go with Vice Chair Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just would like to announce that your Joint Conference Committee on Senate File 66, that's the ARPA bill, will be meeting Monday morning at 8 o'clock in room 302, the JEC room. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee Number 4, Education, will meet upon noon recess on Monday to consider one bill, Senate File 62.
Thank you. Chairman Olson.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet Monday morning in E001 to consider one bill, Senate File 100, stocking amendments, and we will meet at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9 will get to sleep in. There is no meeting on Monday.
Other announcements? Other announcements? Representative LeBeau, you have privilege. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dos Ina, my friends, I want to welcome you to join me on Sunday, March 6th at the historic Atlas Theater here in town for a special legislative viewing of Home from School. So I'd really be honored if you would join me, and if you watched it, come watch it again with me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further business? Any further business? So members, you've heard the motion that the House of Representatives adjourn until 10 a.m. the 7th day of March, which will be our 16th day of the 66 budget session. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. We are adjourned. Nice work, ladies and gentlemen. Be safe this weekend. In fact, check your email as the Wyoming High Patrol is giving some suggestions about poor roads.